Here we are, another episode of Conversations with Crystal, being able to center voices around everything education. I am here with Eric Thompson, and I almost called you Dean Eric Thompson just because that is your most recent role. But excuse all of that. How are you doing today?
I'm well. I can't complain about anything, Crystal.
Awesome. Well, thank you for agreeing to chat with me today on just kind of your story related to education. I was reflecting this morning on, when we first had the opportunity to meet, and I remember that it was, you were leading the multicultural symposium at MCC Penn Valley. I was working with 2020 leadership. We were trying to find, that synergy and connectivity. Came over to Penn Valley. I remember going into the room, which is now Becca's office, and having a conversation about, hey, we got the students, y'all got everything else, and it just came to be a great relationship. I don't know if I've ever like formally said, hey, I think of you as my mentor, but here in the public space, I think you are a great mentor and friend and a great thought partner. So all that fun stuff. So
Well, I
again,
appreciate
thank
that.
thank you for joining me and talking about what your new role is. You just started with KC Scholars, yet another organization that I know is important to Kansas City. So one of the first things that I like to do with guests and participants is just have them finish the statement. Education is. So when you think about your journey, education is, and I'll allow you to finish that statement there.
So I often answer this question with the bridge. Education is the bridge to what's next, whatever that may be. I try not to limit education to formal education or a 4-year education or 2-year
Hmm.
education, but education is necessary for any person to move to the next level in life. Um, when I think about even while you're in education, you're moving to levels,
Hmm.
right? But you
Right.
have to have something, you have to demonstrate some mastery and then move to the next
Hmm.
level. So education is just about crossing one bridge to the next till you get to a destination.
I love that. And I think about this idea between education versus school. And so, before we started recording, we was kind of have some conversations about, what school looks like. And so, but education, we found a different way to do it. So, people have, kind of to use some of your terminology, mastered different things that maybe they would have mastered before, due to quarantining and just not participating in some of those routine things that they would do before, getting the kids to soccer practice or going to this event and that gala. There's probably a lot of money, now that I say that, probably a lot of money that people are saving this year by not having to get dressed up and go to those things and kind of feel like, here we go again. So that's just kind of a random tangent when I think about all the things that we just have done. Um, but to the point, education is it's the bridge. So I really like that.
Mhm.
And so just kind of diving into the questions, again, I've known you for what, about 5 years now. And so you are pretty candid about your journey as a student at Jackson State, of showing your transcript to the students and like, hey, this this is what I wasn't always a dean or,
Yes.
working on my doctoral degree. So can you just share that story and just how you believe it shaped your career into to higher education?
Sure. So first, I think my experience at Jackson State um, gave me some real world experience
Hmm.
and understanding, the challenges that probably the majority of students face. I think
Hmm.
we pay lots of attention to the students who are doing really well and the ones who are doing really poorly. I was in the middle.
Right.
I went to Hines Community College on a scholarship, finished in 2 years, did what I was supposed to do, uh, went from Hines to Jackson State University with my associate's degree, and flamed out. They told me I had to choose a major. You can't be a junior without a major, right? And I chose business. And I really had no clue, my emphasis was accounting. I didn't even know what accounting did. Like many first generation students, we just tend to, you know, just show up on a college campus and say,
Hmm.
okay, point me in the right direction. Um, and
Just
I
happy to be
really
there. It's like
just
I'm
happy to
going to
be there.
college.
Just happy to be there, right? And it really, at that point, you don't have the luxury of exploring. You really have to pinpoint something, and then you realize you don't really know. No one's really asked you those hard questions.
Hmm.
You probably remember from the symposium you talked about. I talk about as an early age, at least identify your strengths, at
Hmm.
least identify what you have a natural talent for, and then identify your interests and try to see if there's some alignment, and then start to pair those with career options, at least some sort of track, right? So that you're not the kid showing up saying, I want to be a chef or an engineer. You want to have some sort of direction. And I didn't. And so as a business major, I mean, I hated showing up to class every day wearing a tie. That's what they required of us. It was just, and so I felt like, and as you can imagine, being 20 years old, I don't really know what I want to do. Why am I doing this? And so I just stopped going to class. Um, the problem with that was when I came back, I couldn't get financial aid, you know,
Mm.
right? Um, couple that with the math challenges I'd had, right? Um, and so I came back with a very low GPA. But when I came back, I'd had the opportunity to work.
Mhm.
Um, had been introduced to the workforce. I'd been introduced to several careers. I'd been introduced to um, men who looked like me, who were able to give me some um, real experience, some advice from
Mhm.
experience. And so I went back with a major that I could sink my teeth into and that I believed in, I thought was right for me. And I was a 4.0 student from there on. Now, I had to overcome that math class, right? So
Right.
you mentioned my transcript. I like to show it because many students would never believe you could go from a 1 point something GPA to a 3.76 by the time you graduate. But that's what I did. And that's just because someone believed in me. And so I tried to pay that forward. I had a professor who said to me, you can get that semester wiped off your transcript. You just have to, um, go through a little bit of a process and ask for the academic forgiveness option. I didn't know that exists. Like most first
Man, can I
generation students,
rewind the clock about 10 years? 'Cause
right?
I can
You know,
mention that too.
yes. So my 4.0, when I came back, those 4.0 semesters just shot me right up once we had that
Mhm.
semester removed, and got those two failed math classes off of there. Um, and I walked across the stage with 3.76 with honors. I just never thought I was a first generation student, first in my family to graduate from college.
Mhm.
And my other motivation is my little brother was right behind me. So I
Right.
didn't want him to beat me. Um, but being able to, see him and my younger sister in the audience, I felt like I was kind of, trailblazing for them. And they both went on to graduate. And so, yeah, I think again, I haven't experienced some of the challenges that many students have faced going to
Mhm.
college. I didn't have kids or anything like that, trying to,
Mhm.
balance those things. But I did, have to do that inner work in order to be successful. And I think the earlier the better. But if there's no
Mhm.
one to really coach you through that, it can be a challenge. So that's kind of a long explanation, but I try
No,
to.
no, it's perfect. It really kind of leads into what the next question. So just when we, sometimes there's this image of, all right, got these college students fresh out of high school, they're 18, they're just rolling out of bed, going to class. But, we know the data says otherwise. And I think that's a specific point to what I think about Casey Scholars and what you all have to offer, especially in Kansas City, a number of people who have some college but no degree. So it's kind of like you started something, it maybe sounds really bad to say you have nothing to show for, but you don't have that degree that bridge, as you said, that shows that you completed something, but you've been able to go through that experience. So I guess can you just talk about, who's the demographic that our institutions are really serving and just some of those unique needs. You talked about you didn't have children going through college, and so college by itself is hard enough. And imagine, you have children now, so imagine trying to pull them through that process. So just, all of that, who are the institutions serving and what do they need?
Right, for sure. So, as I mentioned, when I went back, I went back after about a 3, 4 year break.
Okay.
I was the oldest student in most of my classes. And so I was the guy who was, tutoring folks and, hosting study groups. So I was just excited to be back, right?
Yeah.
Plus, I was paying out of pocket. So you know how that goes.
A little bit different, a little slower process.
And I was very motivated, okay?
Right.
Very motivated. And, but for me, I really have just always been interested in the experience of the adult student. So about a third of the students, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, a third of the students during college right now are over 25 years old.
Wow.
But there's very, very little on those campuses set up
Mhm.
specifically to address their needs.
Right.
If you think back to your college experience, do you recall anything that was geared towards catered to those students? When I
No.
worked at KU, we did have a dorm that we had a married. You could be married in the
Hmm.
in the dorm, in just one of the dorms. They did like a transfer orientation that was very limited. It was not like the orientation experience. I mean, if you remember
Right. You
orientation,
didn't get the big welcome weekend
no,
shebang.
yeah, no, you know. Uh, so there were some things, but it pales in comparison to what the traditional student received. So, when you think about the adult students, they don't necessarily need movie nights. They
Right.
don't necessarily need to have their favorite artist show up on campus and perform on the lawn. That's not really what they're looking for. But what they are looking for is that somebody understands their scheduling needs. They're
Hmm.
looking for career services to understand um, that they have some work experience that
Hmm.
they can build on, and they need the academic units to understand that maybe you know there is some valuable learning that they should get some college credit for because they've
Hmm.
been in the workforce. So there are lots of ways I think to really address what they bring to the table. Because I'll tell you, there's nothing more gritty than an adult student that with a mortgage and
Mm.
children in school. That's a person with grit, and that's a good place to invest your money. So anyone who's willing to invest in those students, I think will find that the ROI is there, the return on investment is there. They're going to persist. Um, the National Student Clearinghouse did this thing way back. You just mentioned that. I think degrees, college with no degrees, some college with no
Hmm.
degrees, and those completers that they study over 5 years about you know oh I don't remember the percentage, but something like 940,000 of them had completed after 5 years. So they're clawing their way through it. They just
Hmm.
need a little help. They need flexible scheduling. you know Obviously it'd be really nice to have childcare on campus. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
always realistic, but if you don't have that on campus, then you got to have that evening schedule that really works. And when I say works, I mean the library needs to be open,
Hmm.
food services needs to be open, the gym needs to be open. They need to get all the same thing that a traditional student would get. Plus, they need career services to be open. Most
Yeah.
adult completers are working, but they're looking for a better opportunity, and they need to be
Hence
working
them
hand in.
trying to finish the degree.
Exactly, exactly. They're not there for personal enrichment. I don't know if you remember that at MCT. You could sign, you could say, "I'm seeking a degree. I'm not seeking a degree. I'm here for personal enrichment."
Yes, I do remember that on the application. Yes.
They're not there for personal enrichment,
Right.
and
Not
they're
for
not
fun.
there for no, they're not there for dorm life. They're not there for concerts. Um, they're just not there for that.
So that's just a follow up question to that. So just in light of COVID and things mostly shifting virtually, do you feel like there's a better understanding of the needs of parents, or is it just kind of, well, you guys are kind of on your own, you can go
Mhm.
figure it out, or just maybe have you seen any examples of where it's done well and just where some improvement could be?
No, I see certainly increased sensitivity
Okay.
at many, many levels. So, if you're sort of paying attention to the Chronicle um, and what other education sort of um,
Hmm.
reporting outlets and research groups are saying is that, um, this is really challenging, but students are persisting. And they're looking
Hmm.
at students with kids, they're looking at students with full-time jobs, and they say, wow, how are they doing this? They're doing it, but how are they doing it? We're going to get some really great research out of this from March to the end of this year, the grit and the persistence that students have shown. And those adult students are leading the way. They are not letting COVID-19 stopped them from accomplishing their goals. And even what I've seen is some of the donors and the other philanthropic organizations are pushing money more in that direction to help those completers. Wouldn't you rather have someone who is near completion help them to cross the finish line if that's a part of your mission, um, than to probably say to a student who's, half in, half out. We know, again, that number hasn't changed. About 50% of freshmen complete at the same institution. That number hasn't. I've been in higher ed since 2000. That number has not changed. 50%
Right.
of freshmen, and so they're it's sort of somewhat of a gamble. But that adult learner, that returning student, they're there to finish.
I would agree. This, in my limited interactions, I think they come in with a more sturdy purpose or just purpose in general. Hey, now I have children, so I'm looking for that next step, that next opportunity. And just kind of having been on the front line, so to speak, in that engagement, I do think there are some ways that the process could be, short up. I may be using the term incorrectly, but why does it take in 24 hours for them to be able to wait for an ID number? Could it be something that, hey, we can get you an ID number on the spot. We don't have to have you come back to campus
Sure.
multiple times. And I'm sure our good friends are working on those things, and have heard those calls to action, so to speak. But just how can you make it simpler for people who are trying to just get to where they're going? Just because we know, like, sometimes those could be the barriers that keep people from continuing. So it's like once they get there, they're good. But have we kind of turned them off from seeking more because we've kind of put up a couple roadblocks and just haven't thought about how simple the process could be?
Sure. Well, what I've seen, Chris, is cyclical.
Hmm.
What I've seen over the last 20 years is that there was a time we really were focused on adult learners, and we had those really robust schedules for working adults. We have evening classes. We had those classes that allowed you to show up one night a week, and
Nice.
when you show up on the first day of school, your books are in a package on your desk. You know,
Oh.
they enroll you right there on the first day of class. You don't have to do any of that stuff, right?
Wow.
And enrollment increased, and we sort of went away from that. We went back to the traditional student, and I'm not saying that's wrong. And that's
Right.
probably a more reliable population if you're looking at the big picture
Hmm.
for the institutions. But I think now what we're seeing, again, over a third, and it's probably
Hmm.
going to get more like 50-50, before too long. They're returning students, and they're getting those degrees. They understand now that, hey, the only way, the way the economy is going, you have
Hmm.
haves and have-nots, right? There's very little in the middle.
Definitely. Right.
And so if I want to have something, I got to go back to school, even if it, uh, causes me to get a little less sleep. Even if I have to do something really creative with my kids, you've heard about these pods and folks going to
Mhm.
school and watching each other's kids and doing all this kind of cool creative stuff. You're going to see more of that.
The village coming together in support of education.
Absolutely.
So just when I know you've been with KC Scholars, what, about a month now? Is that
This is week 4. Hmm.
week four? Awesome. And so tell us about your role and how you kind of see it supporting those adult learners you mentioned earlier. That's where your passion lies, and those are the students that you really look to serve.
Yeah, so what we identified here is that we have a little bit of a gap.
Hmm.
We serve ninth graders. We have a ninth grade scholarship, or
Hmm.
it's the college savings match. Then we have the 11th grade scholarship. You understand that, but then we have the adult learner scholarship. You have to be 24. What about those students in the middle?
Right.
And so we're working on some things, some innovations, and I'm the innovation manager. So we're working
Awesome.
on innovations to try to capture that group. Now some
Mhm.
of them, ready to talk about just yet, but they're much more related to the workforce and much more related
Okay.
to getting students into the workforce very quickly, partnering with community agencies
Hmm.
and other, stakeholders to ensure that group um, is addressed. The other thing that I'm tasked with is increasing the adult male applicants, male
Hmm.
applicant pool, specifically African American males. If you look at, who we have 4,000 students on scholarship right now, and a very small percentage of them are African American males. We understand that's just an education problem. That's across the board,
Right.
K through 12, all the way up. That's not unique to KC Scholars or any education institution. However, I do think though that you know, if we come together as a community, we can address that barrier for sure. We get more applicants. Um,
Hmm.
what I found is that African American male students tend to lack confidence. They don't lack intelligence. They don't lack
Right.
the want to do it. They don't lack the will. They just lack the confidence sometimes. They don't know if they're completing their application correctly. They don't know if they're completing their essays correctly. They just need someone to help walk alongside them. And so
Hmm.
as we establish these partnerships throughout the 6 county area, I believe we can get to a 5 to 10% increase this next cycle.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the demographics of the adult learners. I just think like the whole program is amazing and wonderful and does a lot for students. I feel like I tell the story all the time, but I remember when Beth was doing focus groups around what this could look like and just, being excited about what that could mean for students and then being able to help a few students through the application process that first year. And then they send me emails, Miss Crystal, I won. And so just like, to see, and I know like even before just understanding Kaufman and all that. It's like these conversations are happening years before you actually see something come to fruition.
Right.
So just to know, the blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes, but then to know and kind of see those tangible results of students having those scholarships, even last year within KCPS, we had some intentional efforts of helping students with those essays. Even being able to share with friends who, again, some college but no degree. Like, hey, here's you've been waiting for that money because that. In addition to, I think the confidence piece, it's money. And, back to what you were saying about you were paying out of pocket. And so, people were looking for that thing that didn't require them to take out loans, but then they had this scholarship opportunity. So I think the world of KC Scholars. Glad to continue my role as reviewer. That's just my one way of assisting and supporting. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And that's just that you really hit on. I think the key for this program is that it's always been a community effort from day
mm-hmm,
one. It's been, and so what we really need is just more boots on the ground. Just what you're talking about there for those folks who have the time, who
mm-hmm,
can, again, maybe host some of those events and help us to host those
yeah,
events. We can do them virtually now because
yeah,
everybody knows how to use Zoom and Google Meets and all that stuff. GoToMeeting. We can do some really cool things to
mm-hmm,
assist those students in getting those applications in.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, you might even see like a greater reach just with the virtual space,
Yep.
but also just who are we missing due to digital lives. So there's of course all those questions, but like you said, it's a community effort. There's a lot of ways. This is I feel like I'm doing a plug for KC Scholars now, but as a reviewer, as people's ways of volunteering and supporting look different. This is a very easy way to say, hey, I'll look at some essays and offer my input. So I'll be sure to include that, as I publish the episode and say, hey, be a reviewer, go through a couple hours of training and, support the community in that capacity. So,
Yeah, I
all
appreciate.
right. So what'd you say?
Oh, I said I appreciate that.
No problem, no problem. My team's great, best great. So, and so just moving along to your family. So soon your children will have two parents with terminal degrees, with
Mhm.
doctoral degrees, and so that might create some pressure. Sometimes I think children of teachers or educators, broadly speaking, and preachers, it's like they end up going kind of the opposite way. Sometimes you're like, you've been bred around this, but that sometimes makes them turn the other way. And so, just when you think about getting your journey to where you are, almost at completion, keep chugging along, but just how would you say you and your wife talk to them directly about education, and what even just kind of in addition to that, what have you observed just in them to know that they're watching you? I've Mari, she's almost 3 now, but like she's seen me facilitate, and then our teacher sent me a picture of her standing in front of our class dictating. So like she's watching, and so she doesn't know what I'm doing really. But just maybe what are some ways that you seen that in your children?
Sure. So there is. there are about three things I want to say. I grew up around Jackson State University,
Hmm.
so there's never a doubt that I was going to go to college. Got
Okay.
my haircuts there. We
Nice.
wore Jackson State gear. We went to all the games.
One of my
We,
friends got married at Jackson State. Like,
is
well,
that right?
her reception actually was on Jackson State campus. She
Very
got married
cool.
in Mississippi. Yeah,
I
my
bet
first
underwear
time there. So
was.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so in
Hmm.
our house, I mean, we just knew my parents, they did not complete degrees, but they both had one semester of college each. They met, fell in love, and I showed up 9 months later. Um, but there was never a doubt. And so I think, so our kids have a head start when it comes to that.
Right, right.
Now, when it comes to the pressure, I would say that, we've, our conversations with them evolve around efficiency, right? We talked to them about the cost time benefit. We talked to them about,
Mm-hmm.
you can do this in this amount of time, and maybe you'll make this amount of money and enjoy yourself. You or you could do this. Now you may not make as much money, but it won't take as much time either. And we talked to them about, what happens after 5 o'clock. Do you want that type of job where you have to work past 5 o'clock? Those are the conversations we have with them.
Hmm.
We want them to be happy, and so we're supportive in whatever they do. So Amaya, I think, is going to become an entrepreneur. She's got a little business going now, so who knows, and we will
Nice.
support that. We're pretty open. Um, we understand the dangers of putting too much pressure on the kids to so
Agreed. Agreed.
yeah. Now my middle child, uh, I think she's doomed to become an educator. She's she is
Can't help herself. Is she one of those that plays school? That was me.
she does, and then everything we ask her about, she asks, "Can I get a scholarship doing that?" She's 10 years old, right? Hey, Eden, do you want to,
Nice.
play the violin? Can I get a scholarship? So she's locked in. You
Well,
know. um, Jackson is going to be either a professional musician, or an artist, or a chef. We just don't know yet.
he's got plenty of time. Plenty of time.
He's got plenty of time, plenty of talent. So we're pretty open. One of the things we both understand is that quality of life is
Mhm.
the most important thing that you can have, and that it's not what you make, it's what you spend. And you can be very strategic and plan, and not just, some people kind of go through life, and they kind of take what they get, and then they make up for it over
Mhm.
here or over there.
Mhm.
But you can actually go through this thing with a plan. All your plans aren't going to work out, but I
Right.
think you can have a plan as long as your expectations are realistic, and you know what your efforts are going to produce. Then I think you're going to craft a better life for yourself. That's what we bring to the table with our experience.
Mhm.
My wife would tell you that she never really would have been able to understand what it's like to be a faculty member at a Research One university, and
Right.
what that entails and what that requires. There's no way to know. We're not in those spaces often enough as young people
Mhm.
to be introduced and exposed to those careers. Um, I can tell you that I feel like I can do anything, and so, you know, who knows what might be next? You know what I mean? Um, but I have to have a quality of life. I have to be able to have a balance. So I love what I'm doing now. I love working with students. I always have.
Mhm.
I've talked to you about it. When I first moved here, my goal was to start a community-based a college access program. And
Mhm.
then I realized, well, somebody already done it. So let me go work for them. I want to work for Kaufman Scholars.
Right. Right.
So this is just who I am. And as long as I'm loving it, I'll keep doing it. So, and I want them to see that. I want them to see me happy, so that they know that they can be happy. They don't just have to work work till they die, and pay bills. So,
I know that sounds so treacherous at times, but I think that's kind of the joy and beauty of doing better than your parents did, so to speak. From a financial and educational standpoint, it's like they don't have those worries that maybe other children are experiencing because of the work that you all have put in, and so like you said, that hopefully this translates into what they're able to provide for themselves and their families moving forward.
yeah. Well, again, there's no book.
No,
you're
but well, there are. But I mean, do you really take the parenting book
well.
seriously?
I want to see the kids that they wrote. Who were their test subjects when they wrote these books, because some of the
Hmm.
stuff hasn't worked for me. But
Yeah,
you learn as you go, right?
absolutely. All right. So the final question, just when we think about your career holistically, so 2 decades, 20 years, as you
Mhm.
said, in higher education, what's your call to action to people around your work and just your call to action around your work and education moving forward?
Sure. I think what we're seeing, and I think again, everything's cyclical. We've seen it,
Hmm.
you know, back. Trying to think, maybe when I was in at the community college, a real sort of linkage between K through 12, community college, and the 4-year schools.
Hmm.
And so, I think we got away from it a little bit. Now we're kind of getting back to it. But I think we
Hmm.
just gotta continue to make sure that we're all working together, making sure that
Hmm.
the student has a clear pathway,
Hmm.
that they understand. I have several options. I go military, or I can go to, the 2-year school and then the 4-year school, or I can just go straight to the 4-year school. Whatever it is, let's
Hmm.
not make it so hard um,
Hmm.
for them. Which means that sometimes we have to, you know, rearrange our goals a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, the way we prioritize our goals. You can still hit your goals, but maybe it's better for you to work with that particular organization or that particular school for the kids. Your bottom line may suffer a little bit, but I think eventually, kids will begin to see the education process much more in a much more
Hmm.
positive light. It won't seem like
Hmm.
such a grind. It won't seem like such a just a confusing process, especially when you're first generation. And if you ask the average kid, coming out of college, I mean, coming out of high school, what a credit hour is, they don't know. Uh, you know, it,
Yeah.
and if they're really candid, they'll say, I don't really know how what I'm doing will translate into me getting a
Hmm.
job. No one has explained that to me. They don't understand what they're actually getting for their time and their money. So I think creating those pathways, working together so that it's just all as a seamless
Hmm.
sort of bridge to adulthood is the way to go. And I know that seems like really kind of high level, but I've seen it done in certain places,
Hmm.
um, and I've seen that pipeline building. You see it in business. I think we can do it in
Hmm.
education, um, and so that's my call to action for us. Now for students,
Hmm.
again, your talents. You have to understand your strengths, understand your talents. Parents, you got to talk to your kids about this stuff. You got to have them thinking about what am I good at? Because what kids tend to do is focus on their weaknesses,
Hmm.
and before you know it, they're an adult and they really haven't thought much about their strengths.
Well, I would say message received as I think about, my role in real world learning and just how to make it click and connect because everything is not so, when we talk to kids about what do you want to be when you grow up, which I think is still kind of a misguided question. But just, the idea of, what kind of career you want to pursue. And it's like, athlete, NBA, NFL player, okay, well, if just say you aren't the next LeBron James, what else is next? But sometimes it's kind of into this very specific, doctor, lawyer, which those are important careers that are necessary. But how do we help them see kind of the larger picture, the larger opportunity there? And definitely with parents, I always see parents as the gatekeepers. So it's like as much as we can help them, we collectively, so all these different systems, whether it's K-12, higher education, how do we help parents understand how these opportunities are different from what they experienced, 10, 15, 20 years ago? And what opportunities will be here for us in the next 6 months?
Yeah,
We are all kind of waiting to see, but
yeah,
um, I definitely appreciate the insight and perspective. It really just kind of centering the idea of education as the bridge. And
yeah,
so, how do we help students keep crossing those bridges? And we're supporters as educators on the side of the bridges. Like you got it, keep going, keep going.
yeah.
So,
Well, and I'm glad you said that, and I'll close on this. The other thing, though, I think, and I have to train myself as well, is
Mm-hmm.
that we have to sort of meet them where they are as well, because
Right.
our young people are doing some really cool and innovative things on their own. How do we support that with education?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If a young person says, I want to be a YouTube personality, how do we support that with education? So that should not just you know, uh, another disappointment, because
True.
at some point they're going to hit, some sort of ceiling where
Mm-hmm.
the business aspect has to be dealt with, the financial
Mm-hmm.
aspect has to be dealt with, the legal aspect, the ethical. They're going to run into all of that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
they may have talent. How do we help cultivate that with education? So, I think that some of it is we have to relearn some things ourselves as well. That there are
Agreed.
other pathways that did not exist maybe 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still this foundation that needs to be set through some sort of education.
Absolutely. And I think that was a great note to end on. So Eric Thompson, almost soon to be the double Dr. Thompson over there. But again, as always, appreciate your insight, your wisdom. I see one more KC Scholars plug with the with the cup there. So thanks for tuning in.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity, Chris. Always a pleasure.